This week in the Suffering and Deliverance series, I want to take a look at the prophet Micaiah. You'll remember last time we looked at Elijah, and we left off seeing that Elijah had been vindicated of his enemies, and Ahab and Jezebel had died. And now we're going to go just step back a little bit in time, and we're going to look right there at the end of Ahab's life and his dealings with the prophet Micaiah, and we're going to see why Ahab died. Last time we just saw that he died. This time we're going to show you what happened, the circumstances which caused his death. This is one of my favorite stories in the Bible. You can go ahead and turn to 1 Kings 22. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I think one of the most humorous stories in the Bible as well. It's pretty comical, really, to see human action on display here. The antics of fallen, depraved man is always pretty interesting to look at. So you remember King Ahab. He was the king of Israel, the northern kingdom, the one that had departed from the Lord, many years prior to that. And he wanted to go to war with Ramoth-Gilead. Apparently, according to what he said here, Ramoth belonged to Israel, to the northern kingdom, and Syria had taken it, and he wanted to get it back. It's in 1 Kings 22, 1 through 3. It says, And they continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. Now don't get confused when it says came down. Anytime it's referring to Jerusalem, it always refers to going up to Jerusalem, and if you're going away from Jerusalem, you're going down from Jerusalem, even though the kingdom of Ahab in Samaria was north of Jerusalem. It always says that he came down. So when you're going to God, you're always going up. That's where God's city was there in Jerusalem on Mount Zion. So Jehoshaphat goes down to the king of Israel. Verse 3, And the king of Israel said unto his servants, Know ye that Ramoth in Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria. So, according to Ahab anyway, this was their land, and they were just sitting there, not doing anything, and he thinks they ought to go to war and take it back from the king of Syria. So he talks Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, into going to war with him against the king of Syria to take Ramoth-Gilead. Verse 4, And he said unto Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth-Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. This is a really stupid move on Jehoshaphat's part. Jehoshaphat was a godly king, a king of Judah. Why he even went down to hang out with Ahab is beyond me. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. And he's blessed of the Lord that he wasn't destroyed in this, because this was a really stupid move. And he later was rebuked for it. If you turn to 2 Chronicles, I think it's 2 Chronicles chapter 19. This is the parallel account of this. And after this little escapade that Jehoshaphat had with Ahab, where it didn't turn out well for Ahab, and Jehoshaphat's very fortunate that it didn't turn out badly for him because he almost was killed, the prophet Jehu comes to him and rebukes him. And it says there in 2 Chronicles 19 and verse 2, And Jehu the son of Hanani the seer went out to meet him and said to King Jehoshaphat, Shouldest thou help the ungodly and love them that hate the Lord? Therefore is wrath upon thee from before the Lord. He's referring to Ahab. Ahab was ungodly. Ahab hated the Lord, and he's asking Jehoshaphat, why in the world would you love somebody that hates God? I ask Christians today in this country, why would you hate a nation? Why would you love a nation that hates God? Of course, the nation of Israel, right? The nation of Israel today hates God. Of course they do. They're antichrist. And yet we support them. We love them. We send them money. We send them our support. Got all these preachers out there preaching how we ought to support them. And yet we're loving people that hate the Lord. No different than Jehoshaphat. And he was rebuked for that. Furthermore, Jehoshaphat didn't learn from this mistake. And right after he did this, if you just turn over to 2 Kings 3 and verse 7, he does the same thing again with Jehoram, the son of Ahab, who reigned in Ahab's stead. In 2 Kings 3 and verse 7, And he went to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, The king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art. My people is thy people, and my horses as thy horses. This is exactly the same thing he said to Ahab. He was rebuked for it, for going with Ahab and making affinity with Ahab. And then he does the same thing with his son. Some people are slow learners. And this didn't turn out well for him either. But that'd be another story. But I will say, to Jehoshaphat's credit, before he went to war, he wanted to inquire of the Lord. Good idea. Before you go to war, you might want to get some counsel. 1 Kings 22 and verse 5. And Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. Of course, Ahab wasn't going to inquire at the word of the Lord, but Jehoshaphat wanted to, and Ahab will placate him. Jehoshaphat wanted to have wise counsel before he made war. Proverbs 24 and verse 6. Something that the presidents of this nation would do well to take heed to. Get advice before you make war. And don't get advice from a bunch of lying idiots that you surround yourself with, like George Bush did, before you go destroy a country that never attacked us and totally ruin millions of people's lives and massacre 1 million of them while you're at it. Proverbs 24 and verse 6. The so-called born-again president, George W. Bush, should have paid attention to the scriptures. Proverbs 24 and verse 6 says, For by wise counsel thou shalt make thy war, and in multitude of counselors there is safety. If you're going to go to war as a nation or as an individual, make sure you get counsel. You don't want to go into a battle without counsel. It could be legal counsel, that could be pastoral counsel, that could be whatever kind of counsel. Whatever kind of counsel you need before you go to war with somebody, you better make sure you get it. Jehoshaphat wanted to inquire at the word of the Lord, because notice what he said there in verse 5. He said, Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. Because Jehoshaphat was wise enough to know that the scriptures are the best counselors. Psalm 119 and verse 24. Psalm 119 and verse 24. It says, Thy testimonies also are my delight and my counselors. It's a lot cheaper than going to psychiatrists, too. Even this Bible of mine, I would only had to pay about 2 hours at a counselor to cover the cost of this Bible, probably. And it's far more valuable than going to a psychiatrist, that's for sure. So Ahab gathers 400 prophets together, and he asks them if he should go to war with Ramoth Gilead. And they all, with one consent, tell him that the Lord is going to deliver them into the hand of the king. Verse 6, 1 Kings 22 and verse 6, Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men. Talk about a multitude of counselors, huh? That's a lot of counselors. And said unto them, Shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? And they said, Go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Things are sounding pretty good. You got 400 counselors, and every single one of them says, Oh, go up, go up. They're all prophets, supposedly. All the prophets are telling you to go ahead and do it. Of course, Ahab has no discretion. He's got no discernment, and this all sounds good to him. But Jehoshaphat here, you can see, is a man that has some discernment. Because even though 400 prophets are all with one voice, the way we were reading responsively this morning with one voice, that's what the prophets sounded like. One big, loud, thundering voice. Go up. The Lord will deliver it into the hand of the king. Jehoshaphat smells a rat, and he's like, something ain't quite right here. Is there any other prophet? He's not satisfied with the response of these yes men. So he asked if there's another prophet of the Lord to inquire by. Verse 7. And Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, that we may inquire of him? Yeah, we've got the guys that are on your payroll, Ahab. We know what they say. Is there maybe a prophet of the Lord here that we could inquire by? That was a wise move. We'll get into all the lessons that we can learn from this at the end of this sermon, so I'm not going to cover them all as we go through it. Jehoshaphat knew that the prophets had not spoken by the mouth of the Lord, but out of their own hearts. He could just tell. That's when you have wisdom and discernment, you can just figure things out sometimes. You can see 400 guys telling you to do a certain thing, and you say, something just doesn't seem right about this. Jeremiah 23 and verse 16. A lot of things like this are not things that you're going to sit down and read in a book. Somebody's not going to teach you how to have discernment. It's going to come with time. It's going to come by reading the Bible. It's going to come with experience. It's going to come by God giving you understanding, and you're going to be able to recognize when things just aren't right. Something just doesn't seem right here. Jeremiah 23 and verse 16. It says, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts, hearken not unto the words of the prophets that prophesy unto you. They make you vain. They speak a vision of their own heart, and not out of the mouth of the Lord." And that's what these guys were doing. Now, as a matter of fact, and I will get into this later, they were actually speaking because of God's commandment. But it's a bit different. They weren't regular prophets where the Lord was putting a word in their mouth. The Lord put a lying spirit in their mouth to make them say this false prophecy to deceive Ahab. And this is not speculation. I'll just read it to you as we get on through this chapter. That's exactly what happened. The Lord will do that sometimes. Jehoshaphat knew enough to not follow a multitude to do evil. Exodus 23 and verse 2. You want to remember this too. You don't ever want to follow a multitude that's doing evil. Always make sure that your brain is in control, not your emotions and your heart, because you can easily get swept up in some kind of a movement and follow some multitude to do something very reprehensible that you don't want to be involved in. Exodus 23 and verse 2, "Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil, neither shalt thou speak in a cause to decline after many to wrest judgment." You just think about a mob that wants judgment. Think about this Kyle Rittenhouse thing. Just this past week, I don't know if you heard about him. He's the kid that killed 2 people and wounded one in Kenosha, Wisconsin a year ago when he went there to protect private property and people. And he had an AR-15 with him, and these people were trying to kill him, and he shot them in self-defense. And and there was the woke mob out there clamoring for this kid to be found guilty of murder. And I don't know if there's riots yet. I heard there's going to be riots because of it. And if I haven't been paying attention, my computer, messed up big time yesterday, and I had to spend the entire day getting it fixed. So anyway, I didn't read the news. Have there been riots? Yeah, have there? Yeah, okay. So it doesn't surprise me. These people are doing exactly what Exodus 23 says not to do. You don't follow a multitude to do evil and try to wrest judgment. It's a dangerous place, I'll tell you what. When you get to the point where the woke mob will come after you and influence court decisions and judges' decisions and juries and try to dox juries. The guy from MSNBC was basically trying to dox the jury. Have people find out where they live or something. So anyway, it can be a dangerous place out there when you live in times like we do. But Jehoshaphat, getting back to the point here, he wanted to get a second opinion. Or in this case, you could say a 401st opinion. He had 400 of them, but he wasn't trusting those guys. Because he knew that in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Proverbs 11 and verse 14. Proverbs 11 and verse 14. And you know what the prosecution's argument was there in the Rittenhouse trial? That if you're carrying a gun, you've given up your right to self-defense. Now that makes a lot of sense. If you're carrying a gun, you have no right to self-defense. What is the point of carrying a gun? So if you don't carry a gun, you can't defend yourself because you have nothing to defend yourself with. And if you carry a gun, you've given up your right to self-defense. And therefore, any time you shoot somebody, if you have a gun, it was provoked because you're carrying a gun. Yeah, this is the twilight zone. Yeah, exactly. This is the twilight zone that we live in today. Thankfully, the judge saw through those fallacious arguments. Proverbs 11 and verse 14. It says, where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. To be without counsel is dangerous, but to only maybe have one bit of counsel is dangerous too, especially if you're stupid enough to go to people who are going to tell you what you want to hear, right? Get a multitude. Talk to various people with different perspectives, especially if you have an important decision to make. So Ahab admits that there is one more prophet. His name's Micaiah, but he hated him because he always prophesied against him. I mean, and I'm not just saying this like, speculating. This is exactly what Ahab said. He hates him. He always prophesies against him. Now, what Ahab meant when he prophesies against him is he always prophesies the truth, right? And the truth is not in agreement with Ahab, and therefore Ahab hates the guy. I do appreciate Ahab's honesty. Because most people say, well, there's this one other prophet, but, he doesn't. He just seems like kind of a simpleton. He didn't really have good counsel. Everything he's ever said was never really panned out. But Ahab just says, I just hate him because he always prophesies evil against me. Pretty interesting. Verse 8. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him. For he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say so. Oh, Ahab, don't say that. Jehoshaphat is just a little too nice, if you ask me. Yeah, he hates him. He doesn't prophesy good concerning me. He never tells me that my stupid ideas are a good idea. I hate the guy for that. He always has to rain on my parade. Ahab liked the kind of prophets that prophesy smooth things to him. Look at Isaiah 30 and verse 10. Israel was known for this. They liked the smooth prophets. They didn't like the rough ones that were rough around the edges and told them things that they didn't like. Isaiah 30 and verse 10 says, which say to the seers, see not, and to the prophets, prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things. Prophesy deceits. Tell us things that feel good, smooth things. Just outright tell us lies. Tell me a lie that I want to hear. Tell me what I want to do is a good idea. They love the smooth prophets. Now my head may be smooth, but my preaching's not. I hope. I hope it's rough. Jeremiah 5 and verse 31. Jeremiah 5 and verse 31. It says, the prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means. And my people love to have it so. And what will you do in the end thereof? The prophets are prophesying lies. The priests are bearing rule by their means. They're doing whatever they feel like. And the people just love it. That's a sad situation in a nation when the people love to hear lies. Look at Micah 2 and verse 11. Micah 2 and verse 11. It says, if a man walking in the Spirit and falsehood do lie, saying, I will prophesy unto thee of wine and strong drink, he shall even be the prophet of this people. You got a guy that lies and he'll prophesy of wine and strong drink, telling you good things, smooth things, things that make you feel good. Yep, they'll accept him in a heartbeat, but not a prophet that's telling the truth. You see, the real reason that Ahab hated him is because he reproved him. And fools don't like to be reproved. Amos 5 and verse 10. Amos 5 and verse 10. It says, they hate him that reproveth in the gate, and they abhor him that speaketh uprightly. That is evidence of a foolish spirit in a man when you hate the person that reproves you when they're right. Proverbs 9 and verse 8. Proverbs 9 and verse 8. This is why, when you find somebody like that, don't bother reproving them, because they're going to turn on you and do you damage. Proverbs 9 and verse 8, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. He said in the previous verse, he that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. And you know, as we will see, that's exactly what happened to Micaiah. He reproved a scorner, he rebuked a wicked man, and he got himself a blot. He got himself a prison sentence. So don't bother. When somebody shows their colors, just let them go on. Let natural consequences happen. Let the Lord punish them with the fruit of their own thoughts, and by giving them their own way and filling them with their own devices. Just let them alone, like Jesus said to the Pharisees. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind. Let them fall into the ditch. Proverbs 15 and verse 12. Proverbs 15 and verse 12 says, a scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. That's what Ahab said. I hate him. Never prophesies good, but only evil against me. Ahab was a scorner. So Ahab sent for Micaiah. Back to 1 Kings 22. I want to keep your finger there. In verse 9. Then the king of Israel called an officer and said, hasten hither Micaiah, the son of Imlah. He's no doubt doing this against his own will. He doesn't want to bring Micaiah in, but if he's going to have Jehoshaphat's help, he's going to have to get Micaiah to come in and give him some counsel. But, what's Ahab care? Because Ahab's not going to listen to him anyway. Ahab knows he's going to tell him the truth, and Ahab knows that he's going to do whatever he wants to do. But he's got to go through, the whole dog and pony show to make it look legit. In the meantime, while the messenger is going to get Micaiah, all the false prophets are just trying to outdo themselves, and they're declaring all this good, all this great prophesying of smooth things to the king. Verses 10 through 12. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, sat each on his throne, having put on their robes in a void place in the entrance of the gate of Samaria. And all the prophets prophesied before them, and Zedekiah, the son of Kenaiah, made him horns of iron. And he said, thus saith the Lord, with these shalt thou push the Syrians until thou hast consumed them. So these guys are they're really, really doing it up. This guy makes himself horns of iron. So I don't know if he went out and got himself a forge or what, but he somehow made himself some horns of iron. Obviously, it must have taken some time. And puts them on his head and gives him a little word picture, a little illustration that you're going to push the kings of Syria just like these horns of iron would push somebody. Ahab's really feeling confident about himself right about now. But then the messenger gets to Micaiah and he tells him that Ahab wants to, Jehoshaphat want to hear you. And he says, all the prophets have been declaring good to the king, so say what they said. Because, you got 400. And if 400 people say something, it's got to be right. So just say whatever they say. Go along with them. Don't rock the boat, in other words. Verse 13. And the messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto him, saying, behold now, the words of the prophets declare good unto the king with one mouth. Let thy word, I pray thee, be like the word of one of them, and speak that which is good. Trying to bribe the prophet, trying to influence him, saying, just go along with the crowd. Don't go against what they're saying. They've all said, go up. They've all given him the smooth things. They've all prophesied good. Just say what they said. It'll be easy for you. This is what you call peer pressure. And the peer pressure was intense. Put yourself in Micaiah's shoes. You're one little prophet, and you've got a company of 400 men, 400 prophets, and they are all, with one consent, one voice, telling the king, both kings, to go up to war. The Lord will deliver him into your hand. No, Micaiah's not deterred. He's outnumbered 400 to 1, but he doesn't care. The pressure's not going to influence him. And he tells the guy that he's going to speak whatever the Lord tells him to speak. Verse 14. And Micaiah said, As the Lord liveth, what the Lord saith unto me, that will I speak. This is a good man right here. There was another prophet, he was a false prophet named Balaam. Balaam basically said the same thing. When he was going to stand before Balak, he said, Whatsoever the Lord tells me, I'll speak. Now, the difference between Micaiah and Balaam was that Micaiah meant it from his heart. Balaam was just paying lip service, and Balaam was really hoping to curse Israel, if you remember the story. And the Lord pretty much made him bless Israel. But in Micaiah's case, he really was going to say whatever the Lord had him to say. 400 prophets against him notwithstanding. This is a good example for us to follow. This is what the early apostles did. They obeyed God rather than men. Acts chapter 4, verses 19 through 20. You always want to remember this. Never go along with the crowd. And you know what? This is human nature, though. There was an experiment done. This is many years ago. I probably have told you about this. If I didn't, you're going to hear it again. They did this experiment where they had 5 people that were in on the experiment, and the teacher was in on the experiment, and they brought in one guy that wasn't. And they told the one guy that they've had 6 people come in, and they're going to show you these pictures. And the first picture is going to have a bar on it. And then there's going to be 3 other bars next to it, and you have to pick which bar is the same length as the first bar. And the 3 bars are labeled A, B, and C. I can't remember the name of the experiment. You may have heard of it before. The 5th guy in the experiment is the only one that doesn't know what's going on. Everybody else are all stooges. So the teacher shows the first slide, and it's got a bar, and you can clearly see that bar number A is the same length as the bar that they're looking at. And the first student says A, and the second one A. You know, they all say A. And then they do another iteration of the experiment, and the answer is C, and they all say C. Well, then the next time, the right answer is B. You can clearly see bar B is the same length. And the first guy says A. Second guy says A. Third guy says A. Fourth guy says A. And the 5th guy's like, B? And then everybody looks at him like, what's wrong with you? And then the next guy says A. So the right answer was B. They all said A. But the 5th guy, he's like, what's wrong with these guys? And he says the right one. So then the next one comes up, and the right answer is C. And the first guy says B. B. And then the guy that doesn't know what's going on, he's just like, C, whatever. You know, he gives the wrong answer because everybody else gave the wrong answer. I hope I just said that right. Anyway, he gave the wrong answer. He's following the crowd. Then they did the experiment with another guy. And the first guy, clearly, he's kind of confused, and he's just thinking maybe everybody else, maybe they see something I don't see. Maybe I'm wrong. They did it with another guy, and he clearly knew it was a bunch of BS. He knew that these people were out in left field, but he just said the wrong answer anyway because he's like, whatever, I just don't want to rock the boat. And the experiment just showed that people, under peer pressure, most people will go along with the crowd. They do not want to look weird. They do not want to go against the grain. And if the crowd says something or the crowd does something, they will go with it. That's what most people will do. Most people do not have the courage to stand up for the truth against the crowd, against everybody else. Most people will just go along with it. Either they'll be deceived and stupid enough to believe that the crowd's right, or they'll know the crowd's wrong and do it anyway because they just don't want to go against the crowd. The last year and a half has proven this. People will go along with the crowd. They'll wear the mask, they'll get the vaccine, they'll do whatever. Even though they think it's stupid, they'll do it because the crowd does it. And they don't want to look weird. They don't want to stand out. Acts 4, 19 through 20. But Peter and John answered and said unto them, Whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you more than unto God, judge ye. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard. They said, well, you can judge that but we're going to speak what we have seen and heard. We've got to do what God says. And that was Micaiah's position. That was his attitude. Acts chapter 5 and verse 29. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. In this case with Micaiah, it could be his life was at stake. At least his freedom. The stakes were really high and he didn't care. He was going to say the truth and stand up for the truth regardless of what happened. And this is what preachers must do. Preachers must preach the word in season and out of season. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2. If you're going to be a preacher, you cannot be somebody that is influenced by peer pressure. You cannot be a man that goes along with the crowd if you're going to be a real preacher. You have got to be a man with a backbone that says, no, I am not going along with the crowd. I am going to do what is right and I don't care what it costs me. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 2 says, preach the word. Be instant, that is urgent, in season, out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. In season means at the right and proper time, opportunely. So when it's the right time, as a preacher, you better preach the word. Well, guess what? He also said out of season. Out of season means unseasonably, inopportunely. Guess what? When you don't think it's the right time to speak it, I don't know, they might get mad if I say it now. I don't know, it might offend somebody. I don't know, maybe this isn't the right time. Maybe I should wait. Maybe I should preach this later. You know what God says? Preach it anyway. I don't care if it's the wrong time. I don't care if you think it's the wrong time. You preach it. And I've had to preach many times things that were out of season, that I did not want to preach at the time. And then the phrase in season and out of season means at all times without regard to what is considered opportune. You don't worry about what's opportune. You don't worry about if they're going to receive it, if they're going to like it, or if they're going to hate you for it, or if they're going to send you packing. It doesn't matter. Preach the word. You've got to declare the word of God regardless of the circumstances. Preachers and prophets, they used to be prophets, they must never hold back. Isaiah chapter 58 and verse 1. That's why James says, brethren, be not many masters, for we shall receive the greater condemnation. Not only will we receive the greater condemnation when we mess up and God judges us more harshly than he judges other people, but we will receive the greater condemnation from men and from people and from our church members when you have to rebuke and reprove and preach things that they don't like, and you will feel their wrath. I've been there. Isaiah 58 and verse 1. Cry aloud, the Lord says to the prophet. Spare not. Lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. That's what he's got to do, and that's what Micaiah was going to do. So it's interesting, turn back there to 1 Kings 22 and verse 15. 1 Kings 22 and verse 15. So when Micaiah gives the king his first answer, he actually mocks the king. Now, you wouldn't know it if you just read the words on the page, because you can't get intonation from words on the page, and you can't, it would be hard if all you had was what he said. You wouldn't realize that he was mocking him and making fun of him. But the king's response makes it obvious that Micaiah was mocking the king. He tells him, go up to war against Ramoth Gilead. Verse 15. So he came to the king, and the king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? The exact same question he asked the 400 prophets. And he answered him, Go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. He said the exact same thing as the 400 prophets did, didn't he? I mean, verbatim. Now, we know that he was mocking the king because of what the king says to him in the next verse. And the king said unto him, How many times shall I adjure thee that thou tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? How many times I got to tell you? You just tell me what's true. Quit giving me the runaround. Of course, he doesn't want to know what's true, but he's mad because he's telling him, what's false, what he wants to hear. Micaiah was mocking the prophets as well, because he was basically repeating their words to the king. And remember in verse 6 down there at the bottom, they said, "Go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king." That's exactly what Micaiah said. Go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. In verse 12, he said, "Go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the king's hand." Same exact thing. Go and prosper, he'll deliver it. He was being sarcastic with him, just like Elijah was with the prophets of Baal. 1 Kings 18 and verse 27. 1 Kings 18:27. See, some people think it's wrong to be sarcastic. It's wrong to mock somebody. You should never do that. You should never mock somebody. You should never be sarcastic. Well, Elijah did it. Micaiah did it. There's nothing wrong with it in certain circumstances and situations. 1 Kings 18:27, and it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, "Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is talking or he is pursuing, or he is in a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awaked." And these fools listened to him. They're like, "Oh, maybe he is sleeping. We didn't think about that." So they cried louder in the next verse. And then they cut themselves with lances till the blood gushed. Yeah, he mocked them, made fun of them. Say, "Oh, you should never make fun of somebody's religion. You should never mock somebody's religion." Why not? I mock people's religion. I mocked Mormonism many times. I mean, that's a foolish religion. Scientology, it's a foolish religion. I mocked I mock Arminianism, the very religion that I grew up in. I mock it all the time. There's nothing you can do to be saved. All you have to do is, right? It's mockable. It should be mocked. Micaiah was answering the king according to his folly, is what he was doing. Proverbs 26 and verse 5. Proverbs 26 and verse 5. And you know what? That's the best thing, I think, that we can do in times like these, is to delegitimize the powers that be by laughing at them. Laugh at them. When they do these insane things like they're doing with these vaccine mandates and telling you have to get vaccinated, but at the same time you still have to wear your mask because it doesn't protect you, and you have to be vaccinated, to the unvaccinated are a danger to the vaccinated, that doesn't make any sense. How can unvaccinated be a danger to the vaccinated if the vaccines work? These people need mocked, they need ridiculed. Absolutely. That is what they need. They hate being mocked and ridiculed. They hate being made fun of and laughed at. And if they get laughed at by the majority of the population and people stop paying attention to them and ridiculing them, that might change their tune. Proverbs 26 and verse 5. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. So there's a time to answer a fool according to his folly. There's also a time to not do so. That's what the previous verse says. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest they'll be like unto him. So you don't want to act like he does and act foolishly and be condemned as a fool as he is. But there is a time when you do want to answer him according to his folly, to not let him be wise in his own conceit. This is what Micaiah was doing. This is like, and I've given you this example, but it's just my favorite one, and I'll probably continue to give it forever because it's right here in my Bible, so I won't forget it. Some guy said to me one time, "Pastor Wagner, do you believe in talking snakes?" I said, "Yes, I do. I'm talking to one right now." That's answering a fool according to his folly. Another guy said, "All religions are arranged to make money off of the gullible." I said, "Gullible isn't even a word." He said, "Yes, it is. I just looked it up." I said, "You're so gullible." Answering a fool according to his folly. Another guy said, "So what? An unborn child shows no cognitive activity and thus cannot feel, etc." I said, "Your comment shows you have no cognitive activity as well. Should it be legal for someone to smash your skull with forceps and tear your limbs off one by one like they do to babies in the womb?" That's answering a fool according to his folly. So after sarcastically answering the king And being commanded by the king to tell him the truth, Micaiah then tells him to send his armies home. He tells him the truth. 1 Kings 22 and verse 17. Now, of course, I'd never mock somebody that's asking an honest question. I'd never mock somebody that's sincere in their beliefs and is really trying to find the truth or something like that. But people like these folks that I've dealt with, like I just read you there, yeah, they deserve to be mocked. 1 Kings 22 and verse 17. So Ahab now is irritated. He wants him to tell him the truth. Tell me what's true in the name of the Lord. Verse 17, and he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills, as sheep that have not a shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace. So Micaiah says, these armies of yours, Ahab, they're like sheep without a shepherd. You're not a shepherd. You're not leading them. You are misleading them. And the Lord says, go home. Go home. Do not do what these prophets said. Do not go up to battle with Ramoth Gilead. Go home. Well, after hearing the truth, Ahab essentially says to Jehoshaphat, see, I told you so. He's irritated that Micaiah prophesied evil concerning him. Verse 18, and the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, did not I tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me but evil? Poor Micaiah, this guy can't win. And you can't. You know, it says that if a wise man contendeth with a foolish man, whether he rage or laugh, there is no rest. He laughed at first. He mocked him, kind of, was sarcastic. There's no rest. Well, if you rage at him, there's no rest either. It doesn't matter what you do. He's, as they say, damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. You see, Ahab rebuked him for telling him what he wanted to hear. And then he hated him for telling him the truth that he didn't want to hear. He can't win. He tells him what he wants to hear, Ahab gets mad. He tells him the truth that he doesn't want to hear, Ahab gets mad. Somebody like that, there's nothing you can do to appease him. You just tell him the truth and don't worry about it. So Micaiah then goes into an explanation of why these 400 prophets had lied to Ahab. And it's because God wanted to deceive him so that he would go to war and to die. That he would accomplish the purpose of God in dying. And God did that by sending a lying spirit that was willing to do so. He sent a lying spirit into the mouth of these prophets to deceive Ahab so that Ahab would go into battle and die. Now most people, this is not most people's idea of God. They don't think, oh, God wouldn't send a lying spirit into prophets and tell somebody lies so that they will die, so that they'll be judged. Oh, yes, he will. If you want to believe a lie, God will give you a lie to believe. He will. That's why I think a lot of people out there have never found the truth, because they don't want it. They want to believe lies, and God gives them lies to believe. Verses 19 through 23. So now, Micaiah pulls back the curtain, because up until this point, all we see are these 400 prophets, and they're all in unison, telling him to go up against Ramoth Gilead. The Lord's going to deliver him into thy hand. But we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, there's something happening which nobody knew about, and now Micaiah explains it. Verse 19, and he said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up to fall at Ramoth Gilead? The Lord wants Ahab to fall at Ramoth Gilead. And now he asks, who is going to persuade him to do so? The Lord's taking volunteers here. And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. And there came forth a spirit, and stood before the Lord, and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also. Go forth and do so. That's God speaking. He says, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets. God says, thou shalt do so. Thou shalt persuade him. Do it. Notice, whose idea was it? It was the lying spirit's idea. God's taking suggestions here. The lying spirit says, oh, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. God says, go ahead. That's called God's permissive will. Go ahead. You want to be a lying spirit? You want to have these prophets prophesy falsely to accomplish the purpose that I ultimately want to accomplish, which is Ahab dying? Go ahead. God is not telling a lie. God is not lying. God is permitting a lying spirit to cause these prophets to lie. He's permitting this lying spirit to do what he wanted. Verse 23, now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these thy prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. So that's why. That's why all those prophets said those lying words, those words that Ahab wanted to hear. That's why they did it. Because there was a spirit within them prompting them to say those lies. You wonder why masses of people can believe insane things that don't make any sense. Why is it? Maybe, of course I have no idea if this is actually the case, maybe God sent a lying spirit into the hearts of a lot of the people in this country, in this world, that have turned them over to a delusion to believe insane, stupid, self-harming things. Because God wants to destroy them and this nation. Could very well be. Because God will send strong delusion to those who love not the truth, so that they will believe a lie. 2 Thessalonians 2, 10 through 12. I think if you're trying to make sense of the last 18 months just by looking at it with natural eyes and just reasoning through it, it's going to make absolutely no sense to you. Why did the powers that be do what they did? Why did everybody believe it? Why did people go along with it? Why did people shut down their businesses? Why did people shut down their churches? Why did they wear the mask? Why did people en masse were scared to death of a virus that kills 0.1% of the population or something? Why? Why were people scared to death of something that's really not a big deal? Yeah, it kills people. I know. A very relative few. Why were people scared to death of this? Why did they do things that harmed themselves and ruined their own lives? Why? It doesn't make any sense if you're just looking at it naturally, but if you look at that God sent strong delusion to make them believe a lie, it makes a lot of sense to me. That's the only way I can make any sense of it. 2 Thessalonians 2, 10 through 12. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. For this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. You don't love the truth? You don't receive the love of the truth? God will send you a lie. And I've seen that happen. I am absolutely convinced. I've seen this happen in churches where people turn from the truth. Their heart gets turned away for some reason, and they go out and they believe all manner of insane heresy. The man that had a lot to do with my conversion, my professor in college, he was converted from Roman Catholicism to Arminian something or other to the truth. And then he went back to Arminianism very briefly. Then he goes to Greek Orthodox Church. He's a Greek Orthodox now. That guy is quoting the church fathers and all kinds of nonsense and celebrating the Christmas and Easter and sacraments and all the stuff the Catholics do, basically. Strong delusion that he should believe a lie. One of the pillars in the church of Minneapolis, my closest friend up there as well. Strong delusion he got to believe a lie. That guy now believes, what doesn't he believe? He doesn't even believe in the resurrection of Christ. Does not believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ. That he was raised a spirit or something like that. He believes that all prophecy has been fulfilled, that we are in the new heavens and the new earth now, that Christ has already returned in 70 AD, that the resurrection's already happened. He's a full preterist. Doesn't believe there's a church on earth anymore. The church ceased at 70 AD. Believes insane things because the Lord turned him over to believe a lie. I really believe that. It is sad. And if people want to believe a lie, God will accommodate them. Look at Isaiah 66 and verse 4. Isaiah 66 and verse 4. And I know other pastors and other churches that have had members that have gone off the deep end. I mean, to the point of being agnostics and atheists, don't even believe there is a God anymore. Isaiah 66 and verse 4. The Lord says, I also will choose their delusions and will bring their fears upon them, because when I called, none did answer. When I spake, they did not hear. But they did evil before mine eyes and chose that in which I delighted not. Oh, you don't want to answer when I call? You don't want to do what I say, God says? You don't want to listen? You want to do evil before my eyes and do what I delight not in? All right. I'll choose your delusion. He's got a whole bunch of them. I'll pick this one. I'll make this guy into a preterist. I'll make him deny that there's even a hell. I'll make this guy into a Catholic. I'll make this woman into an atheist. I'll choose your delusion for you, God says. I've seen it happen. Ezekiel 14, 4 through 9. Ezekiel 14, 4 through 9. Therefore speak unto them, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, every man of the house of Israel that setteth up his idols in his heart, and putteth the stumbling block of his iniquity before his face, and cometh to the prophet, I, the Lord, will answer him that cometh according to the multitude of his idols. If you've got something in your heart that you love so much that you can't give up, that idol in your heart that is more important to you than anything else, God says, I'll answer you according to the multitude of your idols. That I may take the house of Israel in their own heart, because they are all estranged from me through their idols. Therefore say unto the house of Israel, Thus saith the Lord God, Repent and turn yourselves from your idols, and turn away your faces from all your abominations. For every one of the house of Israel, or of the stranger that sojourneth in Israel, which separateth himself from me, and setteth up his idols in his heart, and putteth the stumbling block of his iniquity before his face, and cometh to a prophet to inquire of him concerning me, I, the Lord, will answer him by myself, and I will set my face against that man, and I will make him a sign and a proverb, and I will cut off from the midst of my people, and I will cut him off from the midst of my people, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. And if the prophet be deceived when he hath spoken a thing, I, the Lord, have deceived that prophet, and I will stretch out my hand upon him, and will destroy him from the midst of my people Israel. So here you have a person that has an idol in his heart. He loves something more than God. And he comes to the prophet to get the word of the Lord, and the prophet tells him a lie to deceive him. And you know why he did it? Because God put that lying spirit in his mouth. God wanted that person with the idol in his heart to be deceived and to go and fall backward and be snared and taken. He will destroy people that don't want to know the truth, that have an idol in their heart, that love something more than him. Now, telling the truth to a king is a dangerous proposition, because Micaiah gets punched in the face for it. 1 Kings 22, 24 through 25. Punched or slapped, it doesn't really say, but either one. They both hurt. Have you heard of these idiotic Russians? I think it's Russians, maybe other people too. But there's this new fad out, this thing, where they sit there and they smack each other across the face as hard as they can. They just sit there and whack, and they take it, and they're like, oh. Yeah, just for the fun of it. People are nuts, especially Russians. Those people are something. I like Russians, don't get me wrong, but they're crazy. I mean, I've seen those people cut the ice in a pond, which was, like probably 6 or 8 or a foot thick or something, push the ice down under the water, under the ice, and make a swimming pool there in the middle of the pond, and dive in and swim in this ice cold water. I've seen videos of them do it, and get up on the top of skyscrapers, and do handstands and all this stuff. I'm telling you, Russian people are crazy. I wouldn't want to go to war with the Russian people. They're nuts. Anyway, where was I? Oh, he got punched in the face. That's how I got off on that. 1 Kings 22, 24 through 25. But Zedekiah, the son of Kenaanah, there we go. But Zedekiah, the son of Kenaanah, went near and smote Micaiah on the cheek and said, Which way went the Spirit of the Lord from me to speak unto thee? This is the same guy that put the horns on, The horn guy. Smacks him right across the face. Says, Oh, where did the Spirit of the Lord go? Which way went he from me to thee? Where'd that one come from? Verse 25, And Micaiah said, Behold, thou shalt see in that day when thou shalt go into an inner chamber to hide thyself. No, you're going to find out. Your day's coming. You're going to be hiding from the calamity that's coming after you. Well, Ahab then commands that Micaiah be put in prison and fed with the bread and water of affliction until Ahab returns in peace from the battle. Notice how confident Ahab is. Micaiah just told him what the Lord said. Micaiah just got done telling him that the Lord has sent a lying spirit into the mouth of your prophets so that you will go and die in battle. And Ahab says, Yeah, we'll see about that. I'm going to lock you up in prison until I come back. You ain't coming back, buddy. Verse 26, And the king of Israel said, Take Micaiah and carry him back unto Ammon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, Thus saith the king, Put this fellow in the prison, and feed him with bread of affliction and with water of affliction, until I come in peace. He didn't believe the word of the Lord. Put him in prison, I'll deal with him when I get back. He didn't know what he's talking about. Well, Micaiah told Ahab that if he returned in peace, that the Lord had not spoken by him. Verse 28, And Micaiah said, If thou return at all in peace, the Lord hath not spoken by me. And he said, Hearken, O people, every one of you. This is interesting. Rather than begging for his life or for his freedom, Micaiah doubled down preaching the truth to the king. He says, Yeah, lock him up in prison until I get back. He said, You know what? If you get back, the Lord didn't speak by me. That takes guts. Because he knew he was going to prison. And him saying that to Ahab only was going to throw gas on the fire. It was only going to make things worse for him. He could have just shut up and said nothing. Or he could have been like these other mealy-mouthed preachers and be like, Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I misspoke. What I really meant is, go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. That's what I really meant. I just misspoke when I said that the Lord wants to kill you. Declaring the word of God was more important to Micaiah than his personal comfort. He was going to suffer. You know, when you go into a prison, into a dungeon in those days, and they give you the bread of affliction and the water of affliction, I'm assuming that's just some old, rotten, nasty, stale bread and probably some water out of a pond somewhere or out of a mud puddle. Who knows what? I mean, just horrible stuff. In some dark, dingy, cold, damp prison. Think about that. That's where Micaiah was going. You know what he did? He doubled down. I love that guy. Well, Ahab died in battle just as the Lord intended, down in verse 34 and 35. And a certain man drew a bow at a venture and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the harness. Wherefore he said unto the driver of his chariot, Turn thine hand and carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. And the battle increased that day, and the king was stayed up in his chariot against the Syrians, and died at even, and the blood ran out of the wound into the midst of the chariot. And then we read later that the dogs licked it up, just as the Lord prophesied would happen before this whole incident with him going up to Ramoth Gilead. And guess what? The armies returned back to their own place, just like Micaiah told them to, except they returned in defeat. Verse 36. And there went a proclamation throughout the host about the going down of the sun, saying, Every man to his city and every man to his country. If they'd have just listened. That's what Micaiah told them to do in the first place. Remember verse 17? He said he saw all Israel scattered upon the hills, as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace. See, there's two ways you can do it. You can do it your own way, or you can do it the Lord's way. If you do it the Lord's way, you'll get to the same position at the end, only you'll get there whole and, without damage. You do it your way, you're going to suffer. And you're going to get to where God wants you anyway, only it's going to hurt a lot more. It's just like little kids. Dad tells you to do something. There's two ways you can go about this. You can say, yes, sir, and obey. Things go well. Or you can say, nope, I'm not doing that. And then your butt's going to hurt really bad. And then you're going to do what he said to do anyway. Right? There's two ways to do it. The easy way or the hard way. Some people pick the hard way. Now, this is interesting. There's no mention of what happened to Micaiah after Ahab was killed in the battle. As a matter of fact, there's no mention of Micaiah's name ever again in Scripture. I've searched it. I couldn't find it anyway. If you find it, let me know. Nothing is said about him. Now, we could assume that he was released from prison, but we don't know that. He might have been released from prison. He probably was released from prison, but we don't really know that, do we? He may have never been released from prison. He could have even been executed after his prophecy of the demise of Ahab. We don't know. But there's some lessons that we can learn from that, which I'll get to here at the end of the lessons. So let's look at some lessons. Number 1. People who want to do wicked or stupid things generally don't seek counsel from the Lord before plowing ahead. This is universal in mankind. People that want to do dumb things do not seek counsel. Here's something to think about. I just thought about this morning. If you are making an important decision and you haven't sought advice, you're probably making the wrong decision. It's not a guarantee, but I'll bet you it holds true more times than not. If you're making an important decision and you have not sought counsel, you're probably making the wrong decision. You know why? Because if you weren't making the wrong decision, you would go get counsel and just get somebody to confirm what you're doing. But if you're not seeking advice, it means that you probably think whoever you ask for advice is going to tell you not to do it. So chances are, if you're making an important decision and you have not sought advice, you're making the wrong decision. Lesson number 2, when it is suggested to such people that want to do wicked or stupid things, when it's suggested to them that they should seek counsel before moving forward, they will go to people who will tell them what they want to hear. Just like Ahab. Ahab was a dummy. He wasn't going to get advice. When somebody finally points out to him, hey, why don't we get some advice? Who's he go to? The 400 false prophets are going to tell him what he wants to hear. He doesn't go to Micaiah, the guy that's going to tell him what he doesn't want to hear, does he? This is human nature. I'm telling you, I've seen it a million times. People don't seek counsel when they're going to make a decision because they don't want to hear what somebody has to say. And if they do feel guilty and like, oh, I better go get some advice, they go to somebody that tells them what they want to hear. Number 3, be wary of advisors who all agree with each other with no dissent from the group. If you have a group of people, like, I don't know, if you're in a leadership position or something, you have a bunch of advisors, and the whole group is in one accord, in unison, telling you to do something, especially if that thing doesn't sound right, start to question that. Because, most thinking people are not all going to be on the exact same page about everything. There's going to be some dissent among thinking people. Lesson number 4. Stupid people hate those who will tell them the truth about their foolish plans. Remember Ahab? Well, there's this one guy, Micaiah, but I hate him because he always prophesies against me. Stupid people don't like to have people tell them that their stupid ideas are stupid. That's why totalitarians and socialists always hate sound economists. Hitler hated the economists in Germany and Austria. That's why the great economist, the Austrian economist, Ludwig von Mises, he fled Germany because economists were persecuted there. They don't want these fuddy-dud economists telling them that your plans are not going to work. Your economic plans are not going to work because you are violating economic laws. They don't want to hear that. And you know what they do? They surround themselves with idiots, with Keynesian economists that tell them what they want to hear. Lesson number 5. Those who are called on to advise a leader will often be pressured to go along with the leader's plans and with the other advice he's received. Just remember this. If you ever happen to be in this position where you are called upon to give advice, maybe in a corporate boardroom or something like that. I don't think anybody's really in that position here, but if you ever are, just know if the whole group says one thing, you are going to be pressured to go along with it. Lesson number 6. There is nothing wrong with mocking fools who don't want to hear the truth you have to tell them. Micaiah mocked them. Elijah mocked them. Nothing wrong with that. Lesson number 7. Truth tellers will usually be hated and persecuted by those in power. Truth tellers will usually be hated and persecuted. They're not going to be loved. I'd say any preacher that is advising any U.S. president in the last 150 years is a charlatan and a hireling. Because there is no U.S. president that would have any decent preacher up there advising him anything good and would keep him around more than another 10 seconds. Any preacher that has access to the White House is probably a child of the devil. And that's just a fact. And by the way, talk about poetic justice. I just read that Franklin Graham, Billy's son, the guy that was a big Trump lover and the guy that's been pushing the vaccines real hard and telling everybody you got to love your neighbor and get the vaccine. He just had to have heart surgery because he's got pericarditis or the other carditis, myocarditis. Yeah. Presumably from the vaccine, from the booster. So, you reap what you sow, buddy. That's all I got to say. Lesson number 8. People will not appreciate a man who tells them the truth, but will often hate him for it. You remember what Paul said to the Galatians in Galatians 4:16, am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? It was a rhetorical question. Yes, he was. The very people that he converted. The people that he loved and put so much into. And boy, he told them the truth about how these Judaizers had come in there and corrupted them with another gospel. And they didn't like him anymore. I've become people's enemies for telling them the truth too. I've made a few in my day. Lesson number 9. Physical assault and imprisonment are sometimes the result of telling the truth uncompromisingly. That's what happened to Micaiah. He got punched in the face and he got put in jail because he told the truth. So don't be surprised someday if it happens to you. Lesson number 10. Never back down from telling the truth and doing the right thing, even in the face of persecution. There's nothing more important than sticking fast to the truth. We got to worship God in spirit and in truth. Jesus said, "Thy word is truth." Jesus is the truth. There's nothing more important than embracing the truth. Even if it costs you persecution, if it costs you getting punched in the face, if it costs you jail time or your own life, there's nothing more important than embracing the truth and proclaiming it and holding fast to it. Lesson number 11. It's worth it to stand up for God's truth even if we don't know what the outcome of doing so will be. Because Micaiah didn't know what the outcome would be. And as a matter of fact, we don't even know what the outcome was. We don't know if he got out of prison or not. We don't know if he got executed or not. We don't know what happened to him. But it was worth it to stand up for the truth regardless. And it's the same thing for us. You know, when the whole lockdown thing happened, I made up my mind. We're not closing down. I don't care if I do go to prison. If I get whatever happens, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to stand for the truth on the principle. Lesson number 12. Taking a stand for the truth is always right, even if we don't receive recognition for it in this life. It's always right. Micaiah was right, even though he got punched, even though he got put in prison, he was still right. It was the right thing to do. Now, like I said, maybe he got out, and maybe he was well received by the people of Israel because he told the truth. Maybe so. Maybe, we don't know. Maybe he never got any recognition for it. But it was right, and it was worth it to tell the truth regardless of what recognition we get for it. And lastly, number 13, if we're not rewarded for standing fast for the truth in this life, we will be in the next. Let me give you a couple of verses. 2 Timothy 4, 7 through 8. You always got to remember this. You may receive your blessing and reward in this life for doing the right thing. Oftentimes, we do. But sometimes we don't receive it until the next life. We don't receive it until the resurrection of the just when the rewards are given. But we will receive it, and it doesn't matter if this world goes on for another 1,000 years, God is not going to forget. On the resurrection day, when the rewards are handed out, when judgment happens, everything, every bit of truth that you stood for, every right thing that you did, every hard decision that you made, they're all going to be rewarded. And likewise, every time you compromised, every time you gave in, every time you did something you shouldn't have, that's going to be brought up at the judgment day too. 2 Timothy 4, 7 through 8. Paul says, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day. That's at the resurrection day, at the coming of Christ. And not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. You see, Paul, the crown that he was looking for, he was not planning on getting that before he died. The time of his departure was at hand. He'd fought a good fight. His course was over. He's about ready to be offered. His days were not many more on this earth. He was looking for that day, Judgment Day, when he would receive his crown. I bet you Micaiah is going to have a big old crown on Judgment Day. I would love to see that. I look forward to seeing that man crowned someday. Matthew 25 and verse 21. And you know what it says in Romans chapter 8, verse 16, I think it is. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. You know that bread of affliction, that water of affliction, the prison time that Micaiah had, that swollen up cheek from getting punched in the face. None of that matters. You think he's not even going to remember that stuff. He might remember it, but it's not going to be a big deal on Judgment Day. Matthew 25 and verse 21. And just imagine